네, 약속드린 시간이 됐습니다. 본행사 시작하도록 하겠습니다. H2 및 컨퍼런스 2023 테크토크에 함께해주고 계신 참석자 여러분 진심으로 환영합니다. 수소 산업의 글로벌 플랫폼이 될 오늘 이 자리 소중한 시간 함께해주고 계시는 참석자 여러분 그리고 내외 귀빈 여러분들과 연사분들께 먼저 환영과 감사의 인사를 드리겠습니다. 테크토크는 수소 생산부터 저장과 운송, 활용까지 이어지는 수소 산업 밸류체인의 최신 기술 정보 등 글로벌 수소 산업의 최신 기술 동향을 파악할 수 있도록 마련된 자리입니다. 본 프로그램은 3일 동안 진행이 되겠는데요. 테크 인사이트, 프로덕션, 퓨얼셀, 그리고 스토리지 앤 디스트리뷰션이라는 4개의 주제로 3일 동안 진행이 되겠습니다. 수소 산업의 다양한 전문가들을 모시고 다양한 발표 들어볼 예정입니다. 3일 동안 여러분의 많은 관심과 참여를 부탁드리겠습니다. 자, 그럼 지금부터 H2 및 컨퍼런스 2023 테크토크 토픽 1을 시작해 보겠습니다. 토픽 1의 주제는 테크 인사이트인데요. 3시 10분까지 총 5개의 강연이 20분씩 이어지겠습니다. 자, 그럼 가장 첫 번째 발표를 먼저 소개해 드리겠습니다. TUVSUD 코리아의 두 분의 연사분께서 자리를 해주셨는데요. 스트로비오 첸린 박사님 그리고 푸시보 오스왈님께서 Enabling Transparency, Global Market Access and Safety Along the Hydrogen Value Chain, a TUVSUD Perspective라는 제목으로 발표를 해주시겠습니다. 가장 먼저 스트로비오 첸린 박사님께서 발표에 수고해 주시겠습니다. 큰 박수로 맞아주시기 바랍니다.
So, have a good day, everybody. It's an honor for me to be here together with my colleague Khushboo and to tell you about TUVSUD's perspective on transparency, global market access, and safety along the hydrogen value chain. I hope you will enjoy the talk and that you will find it entertaining and useful. Thank you. So in this talk, I will first introduce you a little bit about TUVSUD and TUVSUD's commitment in hydrogen. And then I will go on by explaining the Power2X projects and capabilities of TUVSUD. And then to finish, my colleague Khushboo will present the green and low carbon hydrogen certification. Thank you. So, as you can see, these are the numbers of TUVSUD. TUVSUD is one of the first technical proofing testing company in Germany. We have 150 year of history, and in worldwide we are 25,000 people in total. And for hydrogen, we are around 500, but now already 600 experts. And especially in hydrogen, I have to say that proudly that we are pioneers. In fact, we have been the first to have established to offer a green hydrogen certification. And here is our global network of hydrogen experts. As you can see, 600 experts, more than 20 countries with projects, development, and research activities. And our core business is in testing, inspection, and certification. So we're a TIC company. But along that, our wealth of knowledge allows us also to offer technical advisory in the hydrogen journey to the companies. Good. And one thing which is important to say is that actually, as you know, hydrogen is not a new topic. Hydrogen has always been in the chemical and industrial processes. And we, as TUVSUD, we have also been in the hydrogen domain for many, many years, so at least 40. And but then the question is, what is really new now that we talk about hydrogen? Everybody's talking about hydrogen. What is really new? So in my opinion, there are at least 3 elements which make the current status in hydrogen different from the past. First of all is the momentum. You can see here that the gigascale production projects announced, at least this year, have been around 112. And only a couple of years ago, that was 10 times less. So it was around 20. And this is the momentum. You see, we see, and we will see in the next years, a huge ramp up of hydrogen projects, especially in the gigascale. And the second point, this brings me to the second point, it is the volume, the scale of the projects. Most projects are international, and production companies are aiming for global market access. Supply chains are international. So we see different types of projects right now in hydrogen domain. And third is the fact that right now, hydrogen is being designated as one of the key elements for the decarbonization path. So these are the three key elements. And now, what's in it for companies? We agree that hydrogen is a new topic. There's a lot to explore. There are a lot of fundings on the table. But then what we see as TUVSUD is that this new topic and these new capabilities and new possibilities put companies in front of new challenges. No? So first of all, companies need guiding experience. And then second, hydrogen projects bear unknown complexity. Third, there are risks and inefficiencies. And last but not least, we all know that there is a very complex and fragmented field of regulations. And so the questions, just to make this more tangible and concrete, the questions we get asked is typically like, how do I secure my H2 offtake for my Power to X project? So before, so many people could think that hydrogen is a technical challenge. It is, but most of all, to start with, it is a strategy challenge. It is a go-to-market challenge. Or, for example, how do I assess the infrastructure and ecosystem H2 readiness? Or is my supply chain robust enough? So these are very challenging topics for companies who move their first steps in the hydrogen journey. And these are the three common denominators we find in all these challenges. First of all, they are across industries. So if we look at the hydrogen value chain, a PTX project typically occupies not only one node of the value chain, but many segments of the value chain. So they are interdisciplinary and they involve several technologies. No? So this is one point of the challenge. Second point, they are interdisciplinary in the sense that a PTX project involves challenges not only on the technical or on the implementation side, but also on the planning, on the strategy. So how do I go to, which market should I sell my products? How do I approach the market? And for example, if I have an international supply chain, how do I make sure that the supply chain is robust enough? And then third, as you can see, we have a global outreach. The ambition right now is for hydrogen to become a commodity and that for hydrogen to be traded across the globe. And the same goes for the equipment and all the elements in the value chain. So coming to the project life cycle, to the interdisciplinarity, I said, okay, companies are confronted with challenges in strategy, in implementation, in procurement, in regulation. So how can we bring, as TUVSUD, bring value and solve the problems of the companies in the H2 domain? Well, the approach we take is to work in an ecosystem. By ecosystem, I mean to work together with different companies. And here, in particular, you will see LBST, so Ludwig Bolko Systemtechnik, and EVITY. So LBST is a thought leadership company, and it is specialized in strategy, political economic strategy studies. EVITY is a management consulting company and can bring values to the companies by advising and solving, let's say, strategy-related issues. And then, of course, TUVSUD, with its wealth of knowledge, it spans from, well, its services spans from development to the operation. And this, what you see, is the portfolio we have developed to provide a holistic approach to support companies. And as you can see, we first start with certification. And certification goes from green and low carbon hydrogen certification to electrolyzer, to certification readiness. And then we have the whole project implementation cycle. We start with feasibility. And then, and here, typically, the problem we encounter is, for example, is project X feasible? What is the risk around that project? And then along the project life cycle until the operation and commissioning. So this is, as I said, this is the holistic, this is the portfolio we developed to give an all-round support, an interdisciplinary support to the companies moving their steps in the H2 journey, leveraging our international network. And now my colleague Khushboo will give us an in-depth talk about green and low carbon hydrogen certification.
Thank you, Lean, and good afternoon, everyone. So towards another exciting topic of certification, hydrogen certification, whether it's green, blue, low, clean. So when I say this, that hydrogen is becoming a key element in the global energy transition, I believe I'm safe to say this in this room. And it is, when we see the screen, there are significant demand increasing on the trade route development when these new MOUs are getting signed, new deals are getting cracked. And this is not limited until the what dark lines you see, it's going to increase globally in a tremendous way by 2050. But the important thing is to note that all the regulations which are coming up in the market, all the policies which are coming in the market, and even the net zero targets which are set by the countries have hydrogen as an integral part towards the nation's neutrality. And in this whole thing, the most important topic which is getting discussed globally is certification. The transparency of producing hydrogen, whether it's a low carbon hydrogen, green, blue, or even, or of course, green hydrogen. And I'm going to show you something interesting in my next slide. Is this, are all the thresholds which are set for the carbon intensity for the hydrogen. Now, see, there is no one definition for hydrogen. Definitions are defined based on the regulations. China has something, UK has something, EU has something. And these all regulations are based on the baselines which are set in the countries, the emission factors, the grade mix, what they have. And here, the important part, I mean, I understand from the investors and the producers' point of view that there is no uniformity yet globally. But when it comes to certification, certification have a very transparent methodologies to certify hydrogen as per this threshold. Of course, there are many criteria which are set apart from this threshold, but ultimately it's about reduction of carbon footprint in the hydrogen production. Now towards what exactly the certification is going to bring on the table. And we, of course, we know that there is a application market in transportation, which has been talked a lot. Then industry energy, actually, it's been talked a lot, but there is also an industry where whether it's a cooling requirements, heating requirements, even in feedstock, the hydrogen and its derivatives are getting its important. And these all stakeholders and this all sectors requires the transparency of the hydrogen production. And the certification is going to prove the sustainable attributes of green, low, blue, clean hydrogen. And second most important thing is the assurity of avoidance of double counting of GHG reduction. And in totality, it's going to bring premium price to your hydrogen, which you are selling internationally. So it's all about showing your commitment. It's all about showing the GHG reduction, complying with the national regulations, ultimately justifying the prices for your hydrogen in international market. These are a few standards which we as TÜV should certify. And I'll go one by one. ISCC Plus is, of course, a very well-known international standard in the market, and it does certify green hydrogen. We are, of course, accredited with ISCC Plus for green hydrogen certification. Certify is also well-known, of course, within European Union, but they are planning to go international too with the green hydrogen, and we are also accredited under Certify. Red Cert is, of course, limited within the European Union, but when you see these first two blocks, which is TÜVSUD CMS 70 and TÜVSUD CMS 77 standard, so I believe you'll be surprised to know that CMS 77 was the first pioneering green hydrogen standard which was implemented by TÜVSUD in 2011. First green hydrogen project and certificate was issued in 2012, and many standards has taken the base of CMS 70 methodologies. And another pioneering initiative taken by TÜVSUD is CMS 77, which is going to certify low carbon hydrogen and blue hydrogen. There are, of course, many other standards which are currently there in the market. There are many new standards are getting developed. Even countries are coming up with their own standards. But these are the few which I would like to present today. Now going to the technicalities a bit in detail about the transparency to the consumer, the methodologies which are the base of the standard. And these are the ones which prove the sustainable attributes, sustainability of the hydrogen production. First is book and claim. Book and claim is a base methodology when it comes to certify. By book and claim methodology, or the process to account for the GHG, the main aim is to certify guarantee of origin, the renewability which is getting supplied for the hydrogen production. Second is mass balancing. This is the worldwide well-known approach towards the accounting of GHG. Mass balancing is particularly defining or proving the sustainability of hydrogen production throughout its chain of custody. So right from well to the wheel or to the customer's gate. And the one which is allocation-based methodology, which is a classic one under ISO, is based on allocation of GHG between hydrogen and the co-products, again, for the based on calorific value, mass, and economic value. So this is based on the technical side. And these methodologies you will find most common in worldwide standards, whichever you refer to. And they are the ones who are going to prove the accounting of GHG for the hydrogen produced, irrespective of color, irrespective of different thresholds what we have worldwide. So yeah, this is the last slide from our side, and now I hand over to Lean for a thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Khushboo. It was an honor to present here today. Before saying thank you and before inviting you to our booth at G90 in the exhibition, we would just like to repeat that right now the scale of hydrogen is rapidly increasing. We see this every day. We see this every month, every week. And what we need to tackle the complexity of these challenges is to adopt a holistic approach to support the companies. All the technologies are interconnected. The segments in the value chain are interconnected. So an extensive knowledge of the whole value chain on side of the tech companies, on side of the technical advisory companies is needed. It is essential. And on our side, we are committed to provide a holistic approach along the whole value chain and along the whole project lifecycle to help companies tackle their technical, strategic, and regulatory challenges. And we are also committed to helping companies access the global market by offering green and low carbon hydrogen certifications. Thank you very much. And we would very welcome any questions, any discussions. So feel free to visit us in our booth at G90. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. 수소 산업에 대한 TUVSUD의 프로젝트와 또 인사이트에 대해서 알아볼 수 있었습니다. 두 분 연사분께 다시 한번 감사드립니다. 자, 다음 연사분을 소개를 해드리겠는데요. 라이스타드 에너지의 바이스 프레지던트이자 Head of Hydrogen Research이십니다. 민채린 님께서 An Outlook on Korea Hydrogen Supply and Demand Balances Based on Current Market Dynamics라는 주제로 발표 들려주시겠습니다. 큰 박수로 맞아주시기 바랍니다.
Thank you very much for having me here, and thank you everyone for joining us today at the presentation. So as the title mentioned, I just want to touch a little bit on hydrogen supply demand, especially where Korea fit in and the whole market dynamics around clean hydrogen specifically. But for anyone that haven't heard of Rystad Energy, we are a company that provide market intelligence, databases, data, as well as consultancy all across the energy industry, from oil and gas on over to hydrogen, to CCUS, to renewable energy. And on the chart that you will see in my presentation coming from our own data and our own research. So I saw the presentation from TUVSUD there with a map showing, which country has project announced and which country has project moving a bit forward. I want to present a little bit different map here, and this is a map of Asian countries with their commitment to climate, or their NDC. In other words, they are color-coded by different level of commitment. As you can see here, we have countries that are in green, which is net zero commitment, very strong commitment, either 2050, 2060, really depend on the countries. And you can see them all across here in Asia. There's also some other countries with a commitment in a bit lower degree, carbon neutrality perhaps, or just a general carbon reduction or emission reduction target. But what you can see is, even though there is a climate goals, there actually hasn't been a lot of more detailed strategy to move forward in order to implement this, beside the general commitment to increase certain amount of renewable energy, right? And then you can really see this with hydrogen, because if we overlay the country with an official hydrogen strategies, which in this map here is on this cross line, you will see there's only about 5 or 6 countries here. You have India, you have China, you have South Korea, you have Japan, and Malaysia and Singapore recently also come out with some details as well. So the rest of the other countries will be looking, I guess, for leadership, but also waiting to see how the market's moving to really implementing some of their other new technologies to move forward climate goals. But what does this mean for the region when you then add up all the possibility you do a little bit of energy scenario modeling, then you will arrive at a few different scenarios that we can think of hydrogen demand in order to move forward. And I want to kind of go back before we get into those scenarios and potential future target on what is actually the current consumption of hydrogen in Asia. Here you have two charts. I will move a little bit out of the way so you can see. One of them is a pie chart that represent the share of hydrogen consumption across the countries in APEC. The other one is in terms of splitting that by the demand segments that they are being used in, right? So really clear from this chart, you see that China dominate more than 50% of the hydrogen consumption around in Asia, followed by India, a little bit less than a quarter here. But following that is Indonesia, Japan, and South Korea. So South Korea is, of course, among of the top consumer here of hydrogen in the region. And where are those hydrogen being used in this case? You can see at the top, at almost 15 million tons of hydrogen there is being used in agricultural sector, which is actually to make ammonia in order to convert to nitrogen-based fertilizer there, with India and China really at the top, following by Indonesia. If you move on to refineries where hydrogen is being used for normal desulfurization, among other things, again, China is at the top and following by India. But here you actually see in the orange color and the light green color there is Japan and South Korea start to pop up. And that's where, the most of the current hydrogen consumption in Korea is lying in the refining industry, which will be interesting when we think about climate goals, because refining demand could actually reduce in the future as we move away from gas and diesel use. Other than that, when you actually think of why is then China really shooting over that much capacity in terms of hydrogen use, that is actually in the methanol industry, where they use hydrogen coal gasification to, of course, make syngas, which contain hydrogen, then to make methanol, to use either as methanol-based chemicals like formaldehyde and so on, or to also use to make plastic, which is in this way MTO, methanol to olefins, a little bit different to your crude oil cracking here. So in this case, you can see China is very exposed in terms of the climate potential of gray hydrogen, and also then India, but nevertheless, you also see countries like Japan and South Korea being exposed with just the current use, right? Not even thinking about other use of hydrogen. But we all talk about, clean hydrogen coming up, and there's of course a lot of new use that we have for hydrogen. And when we think about, the map that we have before for all those climate goals across Asia, and we use energy scenario modeling to see what is actually the hydrogen required to reach some of those goals, we have some of these scenarios that you see on the chart. So here we presented 3 different scenarios that underlying what is needed to get under a certain global warming degrees. So here at the top line is a 1.5 degrees, where technically is possible, but practically is pretty much impossible. Then you have the middle line is more aligning with the 1.7 or 1.8 degrees, and the lowest line here, lowest hydrogen kind of use in this case, is in 2.2, and even in that case we see some increase in hydrogen. But if we focus on the midline, which more aligned with the net zero target for many countries, that will be going from just under 50 million tons of hydrogen use into 2040, we will have about just under 100 million tons. So that's almost double. So then let's see where these come from in this case. So moving on to split those out again. Again, our data is kind of based on country level and segment level, so you can kind of keep doing this analysis. And here we present it on the chart over there on your left-hand side. That is the hydrogen demand split by segments. And really, you can clearly see the new use category lie in this region in 3 cases: industry use, transportation use, which including land transport, sea transport, and air transport, and also power generation, which is actually one of the key sector of demand here for the region. You have heard about the use of hydrogen for either power generation in fuel cell, but of course a big plan of ammonia co-firing with coal power plant across the region as well. And why is the industry growing so much? That is because there's a lot of steel being produced within this region, among other things. And DRI is one of the most credible pathway for decarbonization of steel, and therefore hydrogen will be required there. And that's also pushing China up still in the future as the #1 consumer. They still produce 80% of the steel around the world, with those still being produced there. And if they want to reach their climate goal, there has to be done something here. We already heard about steel start producing steel through DRI, even though it's still using natural gas. But in the second spot, again, India, probably no surprise. But if you think about my pie chart before, Indonesia was at #3. Now at #3 and #4 is actually South Korea and Japan, right? So South Korea has moved up because of the power generation demand that you have before, of the industry demand, and of course transportation demand, which we can either think of hydrogen used in fuel cell vehicles. Of course, Japan and South Korea probably the only few countries that still have target for passenger vehicles, but heavy duty trucks is one of those cases as well. And outside of that, we also have the case of, let's say, ammonia or methanol for the shipping industry, as well as in terms of aviation, you have hydrogen use for making sustainable aviation fuel. You can think of pure hydrogen plane, but that's not very likely anytime soon. But moving on here a little bit, let's start looking at the supply. This is the map from our data looking at all the project that has been announced across the APAC region, which of course including Australia. And we have color-coded it by the color of hydrogen, still a little bit, as I say, easier to present in this way, even though we all agree that it should be on the kilograms of CO2 intensity. But very quickly, you can see the dots of green pretty much all across the map with a few concentration in Australia, a lot of projects there. Another part with high concentration of green project is actually in China, in the Mongolia region. This is the region very well known for a lot of renewable capacity, but pretty much no demand. And to bring those renewable capacity to demand center in China, they normally use HVDC lines and so on. So hydrogen provide a way to also store those energy and perhaps use it for other industry as well. Other than that, across India, we see a few more dots. Of course, Indian government has been pushing a lot, so that lead to naturally a lot of announcement. But outside of the green hydrogen side, we also see a lot of blue hydrogen across here, with India on there with a few refineries from Reliance that they want to add in CCS, and a few blue hydrogen projects in Australia. But green is most exciting to me. So let's focus a little bit on the green hydrogen here. If we count up all this project being announced, you have about 84% of the capacity going to green hydrogen. So if you add up all these projects, how does it look if you start splitting by countries? So let's have a look at that. Again, you can see I keep splitting this data up, and that's the way that we can do this analysis here from the database. And you can see, first of all, I split into two charts. One is on Asian countries for green hydrogen, and the other one is on APAC, which extend to Australasia as well. So we're reaching about 2040. If all these projects were to be built, it will reach into about 10 million tons in Asia. And actually, that's almost the same as Australasia region, just to highlight the scale of all the announcement that you have in Australia. But let's go back to our case here in Asia and see which country having these plans. You have India, actually a lot of capacity, then followed by China, then actually some other countries in Central Asia as well, with Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan also coming into the mix, which is interesting. They don't really have, a lot of plan to decarbonize, but they have plan to export this out. And that's really, I will show in a little bit with a chart, and kind of that's how the Asian market start to develop for clean hydrogen at least. Other than that, South Korea also is among the mix here with a few capacity across the countries, most of them blue as well, hydrogen in this case. But this again an announced project, and if you look at this by development status, you will see a massive pie of just concept projects all across the board. But if you narrow this down to about 2027 and see which project has advanced in which country, you will see this chart. Predominantly, one color, and that one color represents China. So China has now a lot of projects and actually building them, actually progressing them. And that's the might, I would say, to maybe remind a few people of what China can do. If they start pushing for things, they can scale up supply chain, they can scale up everything surrounding an industry very quickly in this case. And also interestingly, most of the project in China is being built by big industrial players like Sinopec, right? Oil and gas players, where they didn't really be able to put their foot into the renewable industry before, but this represent a way for them to also to transition. So just keep that in mind and have a think. But overall, the advanced project you can see here in the scale is still less than about 1 million tons of hydrogen versus our announced project of about 20 million tons before. But let's also break this down of why that is. Of course, hydrogen is very expensive, but I guess back to the point that TUVSUD talk a little bit about is the offtake. Offtake is the key here, right? If you think about renewable energy, there's always demand because you can connect to the grid. But for hydrogen, it's a little bit different. And if you break down all the projects that we see that make up of those supply pipeline, you will see this chart if you break down by what is the offtake sector they want to do. A massive amount of color here in this purple color that gear for export project. And that's why the pipeline in Asia across the board is not actually advancing, because everyone planning to export, not using domestically. And to export, you not only need a credible off-taker for perhaps a bit longer contract, you need to scale up the infrastructure, you need to scale up the technology. So there's a lot more challenges for export project as well. And this kind of represent also that most of the countries in Asia, even though they have a climate goals, they're not really putting their foot forward in terms of decarbonizing their own. And that also will put a lot more pressure on Japan, on Korea in this case, because those are the countries that looking to import hydrogen and looking to support the industry. So that means we'll have to spend a lot of money to other countries potentially. But yeah, so that is something to think about, I guess. There's a few more detail when you kind of break this down to see where these export countries will lie. A lot of the project is in Australia, but also in Central Asia, Kazakhstan with the High Eurasia project planning to send over to Europe, of course. And there's a few other big announcements across the board. So whether that kind of help or hurt the industry, I will let you make up your own mind. But I would like to end there, and me and my colleague James is around here if you have any more questions. Yeah, thank you very much.
네, 발표 잘 들었습니다. 라이스타드 에너지 민 첼리 바이스 프레지던트님의 발표 함께 하셨습니다. 현재 시장 관계에 기반한 국내 수소, 수급 균형에 대한 전망에 대해서 들려주셨습니다. 자, 다음 강연을 소개를 해드리겠는데요. 인투코어 테크놀로지 스트래티직 플래닝의 제너럴 매니저이십니다. 토레스 이스라엘님께서 Plasma Assisted Biogas Reforming Demonstration Causes Using ICP Plasma라는 주제로 발표에 수고해 주시겠습니다. 큰 박수로 맞아주시기 바랍니다.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, thank you for joining this presentation. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about our demonstration projects for methanol production and hydrogen production using biogas and reforming it via our plasma reforming technology. But first, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to our company. So our company is focused on inductively coupled plasma, or ICP, and we have around 100 patents related to this technology and its use. We currently collaborate with several semiconductor companies and energy conversion companies, both local and international. And we have strong ties to Korean research institutes to share knowledge and to advance both objectives in developing this technology. Our company was founded in 2014, and currently we are around 60 employees, and we are located in Daejeon, South Korea. This is our CEO. He's a plasma physicist, and most of the personnel there has higher degrees, and it is a very research-intensive endeavor. So our personnel has higher degrees or has experience from high technology companies. And this is the core of our technology. We have patented antenna structure, which we called H2L2 ICP technology, which produce a very efficient and stable plasma. And then we also produce our own RF generator, and we have our own technology to control the power also. Okay, so the business model we envision for what we do is something like this. So basically, we have biogas or landfill gas or any other type of methane content gas, and we utilize either grid or renewable energy, and we reform the gas into our plasma system, and we produce syngas. With the syngas we produce, it can be further processed, synthesized into hydrogen, methanol, sustainable aviation fuel, and also we have the capability to make methane cracking process. So we can produce carbon black or higher grade carbons, solid carbon. So this is our system that we call HYPRA, and it is a 30 kilowatt plasma system which can operate at different, it has the capability to operate with different concentrations of several gases. It's one of the characteristics that why we believe this technology is good for biogas and landfill gas, because the composition of that gas is very variable, unlike just natural gas. So the principle is just basically we combine carbon dioxide and methane, and then in our ICP plasma reactor, it is combined in this highly reactive environment that the plasma produces. The temperature at the core is close to 10,000 degrees. So it is a very, very reactive environment. And in combination with steam, we basically produce synthetic gas. So this is our first demonstration plant. We completed this as a national project, and we successfully completed the task. It was completed in 2021. This is located in Bangcheong-ri in Daegu, and this methanol plant produces 150 kilograms per day of methanol. And yeah, in order to complete the task, this plant operated for over 300 hours continuously. And yeah, it was just in order to complete the task, and it was successfully completed. So it was kind of approved. Yes, so just for comparison, comparing utilizing biogas for the production of methanol instead of natural gas, there are several benefits, including the potential for carbon footprint reduction, which is which could be quite high. And this is our second demonstration plant, our hydrogen demonstration plant. This is a 200 kilograms per day plant, and we are doing this together with, well, it's a project by the Ministry of Small and Medium Enterprises and Startups. And this project, we are about to complete it during this month. Everyone is welcome to come and take a look. It is located in the same location in Daegu. And this is how it works. So basically we have the landfill gas. This pointer is doesn't work, but anyways, I'll show you directly. We have here our landfill gas, and then it goes through some pre-processing, and there is some separation of CO2 and methane, and then CO2 is utilized as a plasma gas. So that's a good thing. Like, we need the CO2 content inside of the biogas, and then it is reformed, and then it is linked to a refining system. In this case, we have a WGS and a PSA, and then we obtain high purity hydrogen. So this plant is going to be completed. This is our demonstration plant, and it's going to be completed in the few weeks. And we're going to have a period for testing, etc., and demonstration. So yes, please stop by the booth, our booth, to get in touch, and probably you can stop by and take a look directly. So those are our two demonstration plants, methanol and hydrogen. But we have more plans ahead for this technology. We are planning, we are working on the production of naphtha and sustainable aviation fuel. Based on our technology, we are doing this project together, also as a part of a government task by the Ministry of Science and ICT. And the organization carrying this project is the Korea Research Institute of Chemistry. So what we put to the table is our plasma conversion system for the production of syngas, and then they develop their own Fischer-Tropsch synthesis process. And yes, we are planning on completing this task too. These are some of the preliminary results for from the FT process. And so we've been discussing with large companies in Korea, such as SK, to scale up our system utilizing biogas, because in reality, for the aviation industry, they don't have many options. Like, probably we won't see hydrogen planes anytime soon. So one effective way to do this is through the reforming of biogas. Biogas is carbon neutral, and by using biogas, it is a viable way to produce sustainable aviation fuel. So we are partnering with SK to develop some projects. Another plan that we have is our methane cracking process. We just signed a joint development agreement with Sudokon Landfill Site Management, which is really nearby here. It's the largest sanitary landfill in the world. They produce a ton of landfill gas, over 300 million cubic meters per year. So it's a huge site. We are going to make a demonstration project for the production for methane cracking. We're going to produce turquoise hydrogen and solid carbon. So yes. So far we have made laboratory testing for our process, and we were able to produce several qualities of solid carbon. Carbon black is one of them, but carbon black is a cheap commodity. So we are, due to the process, due to our ICP plasma capability, the high temperature that we can obtain, we can produce high crystalline carbon. So for example, graphite carbon or even carbon nanotubes, which are very, very high value materials. However, market is not well developed there. But yeah, that's where we are aiming at. So why biogas? Well, plasma is well suited for biogas because biogas composition is very variable. And other processes, catalytic processes or like SMR, are not able to, they have to purify, they have to upgrade the gas in order to process it. But plasma can easily process it. And the market is booming. Largest biogas market is, of course, in Europe, but South Korea has a very sizable biogas production, and in some scenario, it is expected to increase, especially in the part of biodigesters and landfill gas production. And this is our target market. We are targeting around somewhere in this area. Productions of 1,000 cubic meters per hour. That's kind of the average biogas plant. And so some estimations that we have, some projections based on our current process and current prices of hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel, and carbon black. So far, it looks like it is a good opportunity. It could be a good business for us. So these are our projections. Yeah, we will follow. We hope to follow this trend. And yeah, if you would like to take a look at our technology or discuss in detail about our projects or technology, just please stop by our booth. We are in the booth B02. And yeah, you're welcome anytime. Yeah, thank you very much.
네, 발표 잘 들었습니다. 말씀해 주신 것처럼 추가적인 궁금한 사항 있으신 분들 부스 방문해 보시기 바랍니다. 인투 코어 테크놀로지 토레스 이스라엘 제너럴 매니저님의 발표 함께 하셨습니다. 자, 다음은 SOC Technology and Hydrogen Business Model for Carbon Neutrality라는 주제로 미코파워 디렉터이십니다. 박진아님 무대 위로 모시고 발표 청해 들어보겠습니다. 박수로 환영해 주시기 바랍니다.
네, 안녕하세요. 한국에서 하는 저 세미나니까 저는 오늘 한국어로 진행을 하겠습니다. 불편하시겠지만 외국분들은 통역 말씀을 좀 드려야 되겠네요. 시작하겠습니다. 안타깝게도 오늘 이 기술 관련되어 있는 발표에 국내 기업이 많지가 않다는 현실이 현재 우리 수소 관련되어 있는 연료전지와 관련되어 있는 산업들이 얼마나 지금 대외적으로 홍보되고 있고 그 다음에 기대되고 있는 것에 비해서는 얼마나 많이 규모가 적은지 여실히 드러내는 그런 상황이 아니겠나 싶고, 관련 산업에서 기술 관련되어 있어서는 앞서 나가고 있는 미코파워의 현재 상황에 대해서 좀 말씀을 좀 드리겠습니다. 미코파워는 세라믹 베이스로 하게 된 연료전지 시스템을 판매하는 회사입니다. 미코파워가 연료전지를 준비하게 된 것은 꽤나 긴 시간이긴 합니다. 그래서 사실은 보시면 아시겠지만 지금 2008년도부터 저희들이 본격적으로 셀을 개발해서 현재는 시스템을 국내에서 판매를 하고 있는데, 다른 기업들도 그때 당시에 도전한 기업들은 많아요. 잘 아시는 것처럼 삼성, 포스코 다 같이 기술 개발을 했지만 사실은 셀이나 스택을 개발하는 문턱을 쉽게 넘어가지를 못했습니다만 미코파워가 좀 차별성이 있었다면 세라믹을 보유한 기술을 가지고 있었기 때문에 그래서 그걸 기반으로 해가지고 빠르게 연료 전지에서 가장 그 기술적인 허들이 높다고 하는 셀과 스택을 저희들이 상용화를 해내기 시작했고 현재는 그 자체적으로 만들어낸 셀 스택을 기반으로 시스템을 저희들이 판매를 하고 있습니다. 저희 목표는 보시는 것처럼 거물용으로 작은 그 2kW나 8kW 시스템뿐만 아니라 대용량 발전용 시스템도 저희들이 개발을 착수해 놓은 상태입니다. 연료 전지에 대해서는 잘 아시지만 특히 SFC에 대해서는 가장 최근에 관심이 굉장히 높아지고 있습니다. 이유는 다른 거 없습니다. 발전 효율이 높기 때문이죠. 국내 연료전지 사업들이 대체로 이제 발전용, 그러니까 연료전지를 돌려서 전기가 발생되는 생산량으로 가지고 이제 사업을 하다 보니 발전 효율이 높은 시스템에 집중될 수밖에 없습니다. 여러분들이 잘 아시는 RPS, 그다음에 REC 제도가 그렇습니다. 그래서 지금 발전 효율이 높은 시스템이라고 하면 기존에 이제 여러 시스템들이 있었습니다만 SFC가 가장 많은 이제 관심을 가지게 됐습니다만 실제 상용화를 시작한 것은 그렇게 긴 시간, 짧은 시간에 우리가 성공하지는 못했습니다. 왜냐하니까 이 SOFC 기술이라고 하는 것 자체가 앞서 말씀드렸던 것처럼 세라믹이라고 하는 긴 호흡이 필요한 기술 기반이었기 때문에 그렇고요. 지금은 SOFC뿐만 아니라 SOFC를 잘하는 기업들이 SOEC도 이렇게 잘 하고 있다는 걸 잘 아실 겁니다. 그래서 뭐 지금 선파이어라든지 블룸에너지 같은 연료 SOFC의 전문 기업들이 SOEC 사업까지도 지금 빠르게 지금 선도해 나가고 있는 그런 상황입니다. 말씀드렸던 것처럼 그 SFC는 작게 시작하고 또 건물용으로서 출발했지만 현재는 발전용으로 확대되고 있고 중간 시장이라고 하는 건물용과 발전용 시장의 분산 에너지 시장들로 지금 그 대기업들은 스케일 다운 시키고 있고 그 다음에 중소기업들은 스케일 업 시키고 있는 그런 상황이라고 보시면 될 것 같습니다. 미코파워가 지향하는 사업은 지금 보시는 것처럼 작게 시작을 했기 때문에 작은 용량의 시스템부터 거물용에서 사업을 시작하게 되고요. 그 다음에 발전 용량을 키워서 큰 용량의 시스템으로는 단계적으로는 저희들이 분산 에너지 시장에 도전을 하게 될 것이고 그 다음에 좀 더 커지게 되게 되면 이제 발전용 더 큰 규모의 시스템까지도 저희들이 확대할 예정입니다. 그리고 SFC 기술을 기반으로 해서 말씀드렸던 것처럼 SOEC도 저희들이 시스템을 도전을 해서 수소 생산 시스템까지도 만들어 볼 지금 작정입니다. 그리고 잘 아시는 것처럼 이제 그린 수소 시대를 우리가 준비를 하고 있기는 하지만 아마 단계적으로 수소의 어떤 가격이 저감될 것으로 예상되기 때문에 중간 단계에 있는 블루 수소라든지 그다음에 바이오가스에 대한 활용 이런 것들도 계속 저희들이 이제 사업을 준비하는 과정에서 경제성이 있는 연료로서 계속 검토를 하고 있는 상황입니다. 연료전지 시스템의 핵심은 결국은 스택에 있습니다. 스택을 누가 만드느냐 안 만드느냐의 차이입니다. 지금 전 세계 시장에서 스택을 시스템에 사용할 수 있을 정도로 신뢰성 있게 만들어내는 기업이 몇이나 될까요? 아마 제가 알기로는 채 5개 기업이 안 됩니다. 그 중에 2-3개 기업이 이미 국내에 들어와 있고요. 그 안에 놀랍게도 미코파워가 들어가 있습니다. 그래서 미코파워가 작은 기업이긴 하지만 관심을 받는 이유는 스택 기술을 보유하고 있기 때문입니다. 보시는 것처럼 과거에는 스택을 굉장히 크게 만들어서 고출력의 시스템을 만들어내기 시작했지만 지금 추세는 작은 스택을 여러 개 연결시켜서 시스템을 만들어내는 그런 기술로 가고 있고 잘 아시는 블룸에너지가 그렇게 접근해서 빨리 시장에 진출할 수 있었죠. 그리고 미코파워도 동일한 전략을 지금 준비를 하고 있는 상황입니다. 현재 미코파워에서 준비하고 있는 150kW 시스템은 단위 모듈로는 25kW를 지향을 하고 있고 25kW 단위 모듈 안에는 2kW SOC 스택이 총 12개 정도가 들어가게 되어 있습니다. 셀부터 개발하다 보니까 저희들이 셀, 스택, 시스템 모두까지 다 관련되어 있는 특허들을 저희들이 출원해 놓고 있고요. 최근에까지 지금 저희들이 계속해서 이제 시스템 쪽 그 운용, 그 다음에 여러 재생에너지와의 활용 이런 부분까지도 저희들이 특허를 보유하려고 하고 있습니다. 앞서서 말씀드렸던 것처럼 미코파워가 가장 자신감 있게 얘기할 수 있는 것은 수십 메가와트급의 용량은 아니지만 수 메가와트급 정도의 스택을 양산성 있게 만들어낼 수 있는 사실은 제조 기술을 보유하고 있고 관련돼 있는 장비나 시설들에 대한 기술적 노하우들을 이미 보유하고 있다는 것입니다. 그래서 사업적인 확장성은 결국은 저것들을 얼마나 이제 더 볼륨을 키울 것이고 그 다음에 얼마나 더 자동화시킬 것인가 이런 것들에 저희들이 이제 관심이 있는 상황입니다. 그래서 보시다시피 이미 이제 셀스택 과정에서의 우리가 사업을 하는 데 있어서 모든 그 양산화 관련돼 있는 경험들과 기술들은 보유를 하고 있고 이것을 어떻게 확장시켜 나갈 것인가 그리고 사업의 속도에 맞출 것인가 하는 것이 가장 큰 미코파워의 관심이라고 보시면 될 것 같습니다. 과거에 조그마한 그 안성 공장에서 지금은 중간에 있는 사진처럼 지금 파일럿 라인을 운영할 수 있는 그런 공간으로 저희들이 제조 라인을 확대시켜 나갔고 향후로는 지금 평택에 저희들이 30메가 이상의 연산 그 스택과 시스템을 만들어낼 수 있는 그런 공장을 만들어낼 겁니다. 결국 발전 사업을 한다는 것은 상당히 많은 양의 스택이 필요하고 그 스택을 얼마나 신뢰성 있게 만들 것인가 그게 핵심이 될 것 같습니다. 셀 스택 기술은 사실은 하루아침에 되는 것이 아니기 때문에 양산뿐만 아니라 퍼포먼스를 개선하기 위한 여러 가지 활동들을 하고 있는데요. 보시다시피 좌측의 그래프는 여러 그 층을 가지고 있는 스택의 어떤 퍼포먼스들이 얼마나 균일하게 나오고 그 다음에 오른쪽에 있는 그 그래프는 운전하게 되는 전압 그러니까 성능이 조금이나마 계속해서 점진적으로 증가되고 있다는 것을 보여주고 있습니다. 그 다음에 그런 셀과 스택을 가지고 시스템에 적용시켰을 때 실제 이제 레독스 환경이라고 하죠. 시스템 운전 간에 일몰러전시 상황이 생겼을 때 우리가 노출될 수밖에 없는 불가피한 환경에서 셀 스택들이 얼마나 건전하게 내구성을 보이는가 이런 것들도 저희들이 계속 디벨롭하고 있는 상황입니다. SOC는 시스템은 결국은 셀과 스택의 퍼포먼스를 얼마나 안정적으로 돌릴 수 있는지에 대한 기술을 시스템에 적용시켰느냐가 시스템의 신뢰성을 확보하는 근간이 되게 됩니다. 그래서 보시는 것처럼 저희들이 다양한 운전 조건에서 스택을 돌려보고 스택의 퍼포먼스의 최적 포인트를 찾아서 그걸 시스템의 운전 시나리오에 연결시키게 됩니다. 그랬을 때의 시스템이 신뢰성을 가지게 되는 것이죠. 스택은 이미 저희들이 외부에서 상당히 많은 스택을 만들어서 운전을 돌려봤습니다. 그래서 현재 저희들이 보유하고 있는 스택 기술은 한 4만 시간 이상의 그 안정성을 보이고 있고요. 이런 스택들을 우리가 10년, 20년 그 운전 개런티를 하려고 하면 결국은 스택을 얼마나 싸게 만드는가 그리고 스택의 라이프타임을 점진적이긴 하지만 지속적으로 어떻게 향상시킬 것인가 그것에 이제 집중하는 게 맞다고 보고 있습니다. 뿐만 아니라 지금 그 SOC 시스템은 운전 온도가 높기 때문에 조금씩 운전 온도를 낮추려고 하는 노력들을 하고 있습니다. 잘 아시는 것처럼 SOC 시스템에 특별히 상당히 고온에서 사용해야 될 메탈들이 필요로 하고 있고 그 메탈들이 고온에서 장시간 안정성을 유지하고자 한다면 결국은 시스템의 온도를 낮추는 것도 하나의 방편이 되기 때문에 스택의 시스템의 온도를 낮추려고 하면 결국 셀과 스택의 퍼포먼스 최고의 효율을 볼 수 있는 퍼포먼스 온도를 낮추는 것이 중요하다고 보고 있습니다. 그래서 저희들이 좀 더 저온에서 동작하면서도 그 성능을 좀 더 개선시킬 수 있도록 그런 기술들을 계속 병행해서 개발을 하고 있습니다. 보시는 장표는 지금 저희들이 만든 SOFC 스택을 SOEC 모드에서 동작시키기 위해서 테스트 플랫폼을 하나 만들게 된 것입니다. 아직 시스템은 만들지 않았습니다만 스택의 퍼포먼스를 보게 되면 시스템 만드는 것은 그리 어려운 일은 아니라고 보고 있고요. 그래서 SOEC 모드에서 저희들이 셀의 적층수가 좀 다른 몇 개의 스택을 가지고 저희들이 SOEC 모드로 퍼포먼스를 확인해 본 결과 하단에 보시는 테이블에서처럼 유수의 현재 그 SOEC 시스템을 개발하고 있는 기업들에서 보여주고 있는 퍼포먼스를 저희 스택에서도 유사하게 나타난다는 걸 아실 수가 있습니다. 그래서 이러한 그 기술적인 근거로 우리 SOEC 시스템도 미코파워에서 좀 더 빠른 시간 내에 개발할 수 있지 않겠나 하고 저희들은 기대를 하고 있습니다. 마찬가지로 제일 중요한 건 SOEC 시스템도 SOEC 모드에서의 스택의 어떤 퍼포먼스 맵이 가장 중요하다고 보고 있어서 저희들이 다양한 조건에서 시스템을 만들기 전에 이미 최적의 SOEC 모드용 스택의 퍼포먼스를 저희들이 시나리오를 이제 구축하기 위해서 다양하게 퍼포먼스를 좀 확인을 했습니다. 그래서 여기서 이제 최적 포인트를 찾아서 시스템에 적용하는 그런 알고리즘으로 전환시키면 되겠죠. 시스템의 퍼포먼스는 뭐 여지없이 국내에서는 저희들이 최고로 지금 유지를 하고 있습니다. 잘 아시는 것처럼 일본의 교세라가 지금 700W급 SOFC 시스템으로 보이고 있는 효율이 55%입니다. 그래서 저희들이 지금 그 정도 수준에 이제 거의 도달했다고 보시면 될 것 같고요. 그 다음에 시스템의 퍼포먼스는 지금 현재 저희들이 가장 장기간으로 돌린 그 시스템의 운전이 대략 2만 시간, 2년 이상을 지금 운전을 좀 돌리고 있습니다. 그래서 중간에 여러 가지 어떤 시스템의 운전 조건이나 환경들의 변수에 따라 가지고 우리가 의도하지 않았던 이머전시도 겪게 되고 그 다음에 필요에 따라 가지고 스택을 교체하기도 하긴 하지만 이 또한 마찬가지로 저희들이 불가피하게 경험을 통해 가지고 빠른 시간 내에 그 신뢰성을 확보하려고 하고 있습니다. 잘 아시는 것처럼 스택의 내구성이나 신뢰성에 관심을 가지고 계시지만 실제 시스템에는 스택 외에도 굉장히 많은 부품들이 들어가 있습니다. 그 시스템의 부품들을 개런티하고 있는 사항은 아니기 때문에 시스템 기술들은 결국은 스택에 너무 의존하지 않고 시스템 그 부품, 소위 말하는 BOP라고 하는 부품들의 신뢰성과 내구성에 대해서도 지속적으로 개발이 필요한 사항이라고 보시면 될 것 같습니다. 8kW 시스템은 저희 지금 이번에 전시회에 나와 있는데요. 63%라고 해가지고 저희들이 이제 전시회 부스에다가 이렇게 아나운스를 했습니다. 그래서 이미 발전용에서 가장 높은 효율을 보이고 있는 블룸 에너지 수준으로 발전 효율은 이미 그거보다 더 작은 시스템에서 구현을 완료를 했고 저희들이 집중하려고 하는 것은 지금부터는 신뢰성이다. 장시간 운전하여도 수명이 오랫동안 유지될 수 있도록 하기 위한 그런 기술에 좀 집중하려고 하고 있습니다. 시스템 운영을 해보면 결국은 앞서 말씀드렸던 것처럼 다양한 운전 조건이나 환경의 변수들 이런 그 블랙아웃 같은 이런 현상들이 시스템에 지금 영향을 많이 미치는 것으로 확인이 되고요. 그 외에도 다양한 BOP들이 아직 많은 플레이어를 가지고 있지 않아서 그런지 부품이나 그 부품에 대한 신뢰성이나 내구성도 여전히 어떤 그 한계치에 머물러 있습니다. 이런 부분들은 결국은 산업 전체가 좀 커져야지만 시장 규모가 커져야지만 지금 많은 플레이어들이 들어와서 이런 것들을 이제 개선시킬 수 있을 거라고 예상이 되는데 잘 아시는 것처럼 발전용에 비해서 건물용은 플레이어도 작고 시장 규모도 적습니다. 그래서 지금 옆에 방에서 사실은 건물용 에너지 분산 발전과 관련돼 있는 활성화 정책 세미나들을 하고 있는데 저런 활동들이 결국은 누적돼서 작은 시스템을 충분히 많이 돌릴 수 있는 시장 규모가 확대될 것이라고 예상이 되고 그를 통해서 수많은 부품 기업들이 이 SOFC 또는 SOEC 시스템에 관심을 가지고 도전하게 된다면 좀 더 빠른 시간 내에 긴 수명을 가지게 되는 제품들이 나올 수 있지 않겠나 보고 있습니다. 뿐만 아니라 지금 저희들이 자체적으로 이미 이제 상용화 단계에 있는 제품 기능 중에 하나는 국내에서는 독특하게도 그 일본이나 미국과 다르게 정전 시에 연료전지 시스템이 이렇게 꺼지게 되어 있습니다. 연료전지 시스템, 고온에서 동작하고 있는 연료전지 시스템이 꺼지게 된다는 얘기는 결국은 불필요하게 사실은 그 부하를 다시 껐다가 켜야 되는 그런 상황, 그 다음에 온도가 떨어졌다가 다시 올라와야 되는 상황, 이런 상황들이 생기게 됩니다. 그래서 그럴 때 이제 시스템의 수명이 이제 줄어드는 그런 효과가 있기 때문에 정전 시에도 지속 발전할 수 있는 그런 기능들을 담아내고자 하고 있고, 예상하시겠습니다만 정전 시에 연료전지 시스템이 꺼지지 않는 것이 정상적인 반응이죠. 그리고 그런 연료전지 시스템을 우리가 비상전원으로 활용하기 위한 정책들을 지금 서울시 주관으로 빠르게 만들어내려고 하고 있습니다. 이미 저희들이 이제 도시가스를 사용하는 시스템은 이미 건물용으로 나와 있고, 수소를 직접 사용할 수 있는 시스템도 2kW 시스템으로 만들어 놨습니다. 그리고 혹자는 SFC가 수소 연료를 사용했을 때 그 발전 효율이 떨어질 것을 염려를 하고 계신데요. 실제로 저희들이 만들어 놓은 시스템을 보니 현재 PEM 기술로 만들어 놓은 직접 수소용 연료전지 시스템보다 발전 효율이 더 높게 나오는 것을 확인했습니다. 그래서 저희들은 이런 기술 바탕으로 8kW나 150kW용으로 좀 더 고출력의 수소 시스템을 만들 그럴 계획도 가지고 있습니다. 이미 150kW 시스템은 타겟을 저희들이 블룸 에너지를 타겟으로 보고 있어요. 우리 경쟁사는 어찌됐든 SOFC로는 블룸 에너지가 타겟이 맞겠죠. 그래서 현실적으로 저희들이 지금 150kW 시스템으로 발전 효율을 65%까지 지향을 하고 있고요. 그 다음에 블룸 에너지가 수백 메가와트급에서 목표로 지향했던 부분들을 저희들이 수십 메가급에서도 구현해낼 수 있도록 그렇게 도전적으로 지금 목표를 지정해 놓고 준비를 하고 있습니다. 그래서 저희 시스템은 아마도 2026년도쯤이면 발전용 시스템을 출시할 수 있을 것으로 예상을 하고 있습니다. 미쿠파워가 지향하는 것은 연료전지의 불모지인 국내에 어찌됐든 앞서서 경험한 여러 가지 건물용 또는 발전용 연료전지의 어떤 정책과 시장들이 형성이 이미 돼 있습니다. 느리긴 하지만 꾸준하게 해온 덕분에 미쿠파워는 SOFC와 SOEC 기술의 핵심인 스택 기술을 보유하게 되었고요. 이를 바탕으로 빠르게 시장이 필요로 하는 고출력 고효율의 SOFC, SOEC 시스템으로 지속 가능한 어떤 수소 사회를 그리고 탄소 중립 사회를 실현하는데 기여할 수 있도록 느리지만 그렇지만 신뢰성 있는 그런 발걸음을 계속 해 나갈 수 있도록 그렇게 해보겠습니다. 네, 이상입니다. 감사합니다.
네, 발표 잘 들었습니다. 탄소 중립을 위한 SOC 기술과 수소 사업 모델에 대해서 들려주셨습니다. 미코파워의 발표 함께 청해 들어보셨습니다. 자, 이제 테크토크 토픽 1 마지막 순서가 되겠습니다. 프랑스 전력공사 아시아 태평양 지역 연구실 리서치 사이언티스트이십니다. 빅토르 마코르트님께서 라이프 사이클 어세스먼트 of H2 파워 투 파워 프로젝트라는 주제로 발표 들려주시겠습니다. 빅토르 마코르트 연사님 여러분 박수로 맞아주시기 바랍니다.
Okay, so hi everyone, good afternoon. Thank you very much, first of all, to the organization committee for this speaking opportunity in this great event, and also thank you to you all for joining. So I'm Victor MAQUART, so yeah, here. So a member of the EDF Lab Asia Pacific, and I've been currently working on environmental related topics regarding hydrogen production and more in general the hydrogen value chain. But first, let me please introduce the company I'm representing, so EDF. So we are a French state-owned utility company and electricity producer active in all segments of the electricity value chain. And we are committed to provide low carbon electricity based on nuclear power mainly and renewables. And so it's quite logically that we get interested in hydrogen topics. We have been investing a lot, for instance, in electrolyzer deployment and also in research in low carbon H2 production and low carbon H2 or green H2 certification. So I am here today to share with you the context of our studies around hydrogen power-to-power projects lifecycle assessment, the main outcome of our studies, and what are our main takes on the matter. Starting with first a bit of context. So, as you may all know of, the great challenge of electricity generation nowadays to tackle climate change is to deploy renewables at a massive scale and quite quickly to change these very low ratios that are displayed on screen. But this actually comes with other challenges, such as grid infrastructure or intermittency problems. So, in fact, we still need dispatchable electricity generation, but the problem is that nowadays, this dispatchable electricity generation, more than 60% of these facilities are really carbon-intensive power plants, such as coal, natural gas, or oil. That accounts for nearly 40% of global CO2 emissions. And as you can see on this slide, the thing is that over the whole life cycle of the available current technologies, these facilities emit 10 to 20 times more CO2 than renewables. So there is a need to replace these facilities with renewables, but we still need dispatchable means to ensure the stability of grids. And so there is a need also to deploy more low-carbon dispatchable facilities. And so one may think of nuclear or hydropower or even biomass. But other countries have also thought about hydrogen generation and converted CCGT power plants. And in fact, such countries are quite numerous to have made this choice to reach their net zero goals by 2050. South Korea, for instance, has a plan on having 50% co-combustion of hydrogen together with natural gas in 30% of gas power plants by 2035. For ammonia, the country plans to have 20% co-combustion with coal in half of the coal power plants, even earlier in 2030. Singapore, earlier this year, released an expression of interest to build the first hydrogen-ready CCGT power plants by the next 3 years, and has even a more ambitious goal of having 50% of its electricity supplied by hydrogen in 2050. And on the European side, you can see that Germany has a plan to build 24 gigawatts of hydrogen-ready power plants, starting with 19 gigawatts of hybrid hydrogen power generation by 2035. But one may ask, will it be enough to reach the net zero goal? So let's put aside carbon capture and storage here because we haven't studied it yet. Maybe part of the solution. So this is a quick view on hydrogen power-to-power basic scheme. And as you can see, there are many processes involved. So from renewable electricity generation, then electrolysis, storage, shipping, and firing in another country. And many critics to this kind of projects have pointed out that you inevitably lose energy along these processes, and that hydrogen power-to-power generation has a overall efficiency that is too low. One may argue that it doesn't really matter, in fact, if at the top of the value chain you have renewable and almost free energy, right? But the thing is that we need to make sure that along all this process, we don't add unwanted CO2 emissions that could have a dramatic impact on the final electricity produced due to this overall poor global efficiency. And so now to come back a bit into the context of our studies around life cycle assessment. So as I mentioned just earlier, the Singaporean authorities expressed an expression of interest to have a first 150 megawatts hydrogen-ready power plants pretty soon. And that is because, in fact, the country is highly relying on natural gas for its electricity supply, due mainly to the fact that there isn't much space or resources available to deploy renewables. So they have really a strong ambition of deploying hydrogen-ready power plant quickly. Now, if you take 1 kilowatt hour taken out of the Singaporean grid, it emits roughly 425 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. The problem is that if you take hydrogen nowadays, it is pretty far from being low carbon. In fact, the carbon content of the current available hydrogen is more around 12 to 13.5 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kg. And so if you were to fire it directly in a CCGT power plant, it will emit more than 620 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour, which is roughly 50% more or worse than the current gas option. That's why in this expression of interest, the Singaporean authorities asked for, of course, the economics of such a project, but also pointed out that they wanted the carbon content of the hydrogen delivered in Singapore from cradle to gate. And so including the green hydrogen certification since the design stage of the project and not after. And so basically for this project, what we chose to do was to look at solar power generation in Australia, combined with an electrolyzer, then storage, conversion into ammonia, since nowadays with current technologies is the most widely available option, and also it emits less emissions than any other conversion mean, and then shipping to Singapore for final utilization. But first, one question remains. What indeed is green or low carbon hydrogen? And in fact, it's a very important and interesting question, since now there is no standard or international regulation on the matter or ISO standards. And so many countries or even companies have deployed their own scheme, very different, ranging from 1 kilograms of CO2 equivalents per kilograms of H2 to 4. And so it's interesting, but for our study, we chose on purpose not to rely on any of these standards, but more to track down the emissions, have a pragmatic approach, see what's doable with available technologies. And the philosophy was really to sort of point out the processes we need to pay extra attention to in order to curb the CO2 emission of this hydrogen power-to-power project. And so I'm going to dig a bit more into the results and the scope of our study. So this is a pretty messy and complicated block diagram, but you can see that basically it can be divided in two categories. So the upstream category for the upstream processes, including the electricity generation in Australia, then the electrolysis, and then when we have the hydrogen, the conversion into ammonia. And then you have the downstream processes that begin with the storage of ammonia, the shipping to Singapore, and then cracking back into hydrogen for final utilization in Singapore. And so to really have a pragmatic approach on this life cycle assessment, we chose to derive two different cases. So a first case assuming that all the upstream processes are powered with renewable power, so solar PV. And so this optimistic case will give us the best CO2 footprint achievable for our project. And then a more, let's say, conservative case, considering that only the electrolyzer is plugged to a solar PV generation, and considering that ancillary processes of the upstream processes are sourced directly via the grid, which may be more realistic if you are considering buying your intermediary goods on the local markets. And so, just for precision, all the results that I'll be showing here, we have this from the renowned world-class database EcoInvent, which is a commonplace in environmental assessment. And so, let's get into the results. So for the assumption, we took an electrolyzer, PEM electrolyzer with an efficiency of 58%, with a solar PV generation whose total carbon content over the whole life cycle is around 60 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour, which is commonplace nowadays in Australia. It's not state of the art, but it's what is available now. And so you see that basically it gives as a result a hydrogen molecule with a carbon content of 3.6 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kg. And this seems pretty high. But a key observation is that basically you can see that almost all the CO2 emissions comes from only the making of the solar panels, stating that basically if you were to use let's say more sustainable solar panels, state-of-the-art, or other renewable electricity generation, such as wind, which we saw as an overall CO2 content that is roughly 2 times lower than solar generation, you can almost divide the carbon content of this hydrogen by 2. Then, adding the conversion to ammonia thanks to the Haber-Bosch process, we see globally that we add some CO2 emissions, but all the emissions remain concentrated around the production of the hydrogen. A bit of emission stacks up due to the construction works and the nitrogen production. And then let's add the downstream processes. What is really striking is that in fact, looking at all the downstream processes, I'm talking about the shipping, storage, and ammonia cracking back into hydrogen. You can see that the downstream processes account for practically, not saying nothing, but only 10% of the overall CO2 emission at this stage, stating that 90% of the CO2 emissions are from the upstream processes. This gives, as a result, a hydrogen molecule with carbon content is around 6 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kg. And you might say, okay, this doesn't meet any of the green hydrogen standard that have been deployed anywhere, and you are right. However, if we are to fire it in a CCGT, it will emit close to 320 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour. And this actually makes sense if you want to lower the emission of a grid that is only powered by gas, and even more if it's powered by coal. Okay, so now I've talked about, this is the optimistic case, right? So now let's see how worse it can get if we don't pay that much attention, and if we don't specify that all our upstream processes must be powered with renewable power. Namely, we plug the Haber-Bosch process and the nitrogen production directly on the grid. And this is tempting because these are steady-state processes that are not really well suited to work with solar power. So doing that, one of the striking results is that these two processes now account for more than half of the CO2 emission at this stage of the life cycle of the environmental assessment. And this is this has, of course, a dramatic impact on the carbon emission on the downstream of the value chain, so on the hydrogen that is delivered to Singapore, that is now 12 kilograms of CO2 equivalent per kg, which is basically what is available now on the market. And so we did all this to have a final electricity generation with carbon content is 620 grams of CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour, which is 50% more than the current gas option. And so for this case, it doesn't make any sense anymore in terms of on an environmental point of view. So as a conclusion and recommendation, because I hear that this project is quite a specific project located in Australia with a specific production asset electricity production technology, that is solar power. But still, we believe that some generalities can be drawn out of this exercise. Namely, we found out that doing this life cycle assessment of this hydrogen power to power project, we realized that in fact almost all the CO2 emissions are included within like very few processes, are concentrated in fact, namely the electrolysis, because it takes a lot of energy to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen. And then if you were to convert to ammonia, but it's also a relevant result if you were to convert to any other kind of transportable good, because ammonia is the most available and other conversion methods also are very energy intensive. So this is the Haber-Bosch process and also the denitrogen production, which we need to pay attention to. And so in fact, you see that there are like 3 processes almost around this value chain to which you need to pay extra attention to, because if you were to plug only one of this process to the grid, it could have a dramatic impact downstream on the final CO2 content of your electricity. Leading to, as it is said, mentioned, so there is a ×2 difference between the conservative case and the optimistic case, which is pretty huge. Of course, we can have better results. Still, changing the electricity input for our initial electrolysis. Namely, we could use like state-of-the-art PV, leading to approximately a 50% reduction in overall CO2 emission. We could use also wind, or even better, nuclear power or reservoir hydropower, which emits, again, far less, almost 4 to 5 times less than solar power. And then another key finding that we found out to be very interesting in this study is that, okay, we already mentioned that the grid has to be, you could like plug your ancillary processes to the grid if it's decarbonized, but unfortunately it's not everywhere in the world and you need to have a lot of natural resources to do that. But another key finding is in fact, overall the whole life cycle, shipping doesn't account much in the final results, stating that if you were to ship hydrogen or ammonia, let's say ammonia from point A to point B, even with long distances, it will still remain not of importance compared to the other energy-intensive processes, which is pretty good news for countries who lack natural resources and willing to import hydrogen. Then, of course, these results should change with the increasing efficiency of electrolyzers nowadays. We took an electrolyzer that has a 58% efficiency, but now the research is looking more at devices around 95% efficiency. So doing that, it could reduce the carbon content of our electrolyzed hydrogen by 40%, which is really huge. But still, this increasing efficiency of the electrolyzer, it will not solve the issue of decarbonizing all the ancillary processes. And so, to wrap this up, if I were to maybe sum up this presentation in one sentence, with this presentation, I'm not here, I assure you, to claim that we need to kill hydrogen power-to-power projects. But however, we need to be very, very cautious because depending of your choices, since the design stage, hydrogen can quickly change colors. And it can like come from something pretty green to something pretty gray. And so countries planning on having hydrogen imports to replace natural gas or coal in power plants need to be very aware of where the hydrogen is coming from and how it has been made. And this requires coherent and exhaustive, let's say, environmental assessment of the hydrogen that is in line with the ISO standards of the LCA since the design stage. This to avoid, in the first place, a greenwashing pitfall, and in the second place, to avoid the risk to emit even more CO2 emissions than before, which would be a shame because, again, this hydrogen power-to-power project, this is not a cheap undertaking. But still, I believe that this green hydrogen certification and also agree together with authorities, countries, and companies on what is green hydrogen and how it should be made. We believe this is a necessary step to guarantee and certify that we actually have a hydrogen power-to-power project that actually makes sense from both an economic and an environmental point of view. So thank you so much for your attention. And I will be very pleased to answer your question informally afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor McCoy, for your presentation. H2 전력 프로젝트의 수명 주기 평가라는 주제로 마지막 발표까지 함께 하셨습니다. 테크 토크 첫째 날 토픽 1, 테크 인사이트라는 주제로 5개의 발표 들어보셨는데요. 수소 산업에 대한 인사이트 얻을 수 있는 소중한 시간 되셨길 바라겠습니다. 잠시 후 이어서 이 같은 장소에서 H2 이노베이션 어워드 노미니 스피치가 이어질 예정입니다. 관심 있으신 분들께서는 잠시만 앉아서 기다려 주시고요. 내일은 토픽 2와 3가 프로덕션과 퓨얼셀이라는 주제로 진행이 되겠습니다. 계속해서 여러분의 많은 관심과 참여를 부탁드리겠습니다. 자, 그럼 저희는 테크토크 토픽 1 여기서 마치도록 하겠습니다. 참여해 주시고 경청해 주신 여러분 대단히 고맙습니다. 네, 입장하실 때 바코드 스캔하셨던 분들께서는 나가실 때도 바코드 같은 리더기에 스캔해 주시면 감사하겠습니다. 나가시는 길에 바코드를 리더기에 스캔해 주시기 바랍니다. 고맙습니다.